Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central, and here's your host, Bob Hickey.
And welcome to another fantastic episode of Foxborough Central. I am your host, Bob Hickey, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join with me and my guest as we talk about the people, events, and organizations that make Foxborough truly the gem of Norfolk County. And part of being a gem is having great people that work for you, work with you. I've always said that Foxborough is built on the back of her volunteers. You also have to say that the direction we have in government, at the local level, it's volunteer, but at the state level, it's elected, of course, to be our paid professionals up on Beacon Hill. And I am honored to be joined by one of those paid professionals, our good Senator James Timilty. Jim, how are you doing?
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much. And you've been our senator up on since 2004 for the Norfolk-Bristol district, which comprises Foxborough and 29 other communities? How many other communities?
We had 8 other communities.
8 other communities.
Yes. So we have 4 communities in Norfolk County and 5 communities in Bristol County.
And I think from an earlier conversation, we were talking about it going up and down the 95 corridor as being how they're contiguously.
It's a little strange, but the art of redistricting is not the simplest process. There is some influences, not as many or insidious as some would imagine or extrapolate. It's just a question of you have 200 locally elected people who, after the census is done, need to be reapportioned the way that the population moves. So I have about 165,000 people. Actually, I always say it's about 170, which some would say it's out of the mean, but more people are moving to these communities than they are anywhere else in the Commonwealth because these are the best towns.
Well, it's definitely a growth area, absolutely. Plus, with the road infrastructure being the way it is and the way the roads are set up, straight line between Providence and Boston, Foxborough being equidistant, we're truly blessed to have the 495 and the 95 and being so close to the shore and being so close to the technology growth, and then, of course, the Boston job market, as well as all of the great things to do around here. So it's a wonderful place to live.
It is. It is. We have great suburban towns. They have a nice backyard, wonderful sports, great academics. You got the backyard, you got the state forest. You also have, in my district, you have Gillette, you have the Xfinity Center, and you have the TPC. So, I mean, there's just an awful lot to do real close to Providence and Boston and the seashore, and you're not too far from the mountains.
Not really.
So it's, for a guy who doesn't like to travel, I'm pretty happy here, but there's a lot of stuff close around.
Well, that makes us very happy to be here, and very happy also to talk about you and your, let's see, how do I phrase it? Your legislative
profile.
Profile. All right, yeah. I like that because going back to the 2004 election and coming in as a freshman, what were your first impressions, if you can put on your Wayback Machine hat and think back that far? When you first rolled up there, what did you think? And I know you have family legacy, and it isn't as if you had never set foot, but it's a lot different being our elected representative walking in those doors.
Totally. It almost gets back to Robert Redford and the candidate, where he wins, and now you say, now what? Now what? I've had that conversation with some people, and
that's a great analogy.
It is. We have the time-honored tradition in the Senate where you sit down. I sat next to Senator Jack Hart from South Boston, BC High guy, 10 years older than me, somebody I kind of looked up to. I didn't take my dad's seat. I kind of wanted to see how he did things and kind of watch. This place has been around since 1620. In some way, shape, or form, or in a stockade fence or whatever they were doing at that point, and then 1630 and beyond. So we've been continuously meeting in this hemisphere longer than anybody else. So John Adams worked in the room I'm getting sworn into. So make sure you have the tie on, make sure your jacket's buttoned, and then we'll go from there. But what Jack had said to me, he goes, I looked around the Senate chamber and I said, I can't believe I'm in the state Senate. What have I done? I'm in the state Senate. And he says, I worked for about 6 months, and I looked around and I go, I can't believe these other people are here in the state Senate. How did they get there? But it gives you an idea that, you start to get your sea legs and you start to go forward. When I first got in, it was more, I was the local representative, which I still am, is that my job is to talk with school committees, talk to town managers, talk to boards of selectmen. What do you need? What can I advocate for? What agency, and I still do it, what agency can I fight? What obnoxious proposal? What companies? What is going on? But then as you grow, and you become part of the committee process, and you start thinking of what's important to you and realize I have a blank tapestry here to some extent, in that I'm only limited but what I can think of in order to affect the change that I want. And some have seen some of the bills that I've done and kind of, I guess, like modern art, kind of what? And some have been impacted.
Well, some are a result of the times. If some issue or emergency is going on, then of course that piece of legislation is a necessary fix or a necessary remedy. But then there's also the vision piece. You know, we run on something, we run because we feel something or believe in something or advocate for something. So I'm really interested, and I suppose that's a great time to announce the topic of this program is going to be legislative initiatives. And so going back to 2004, you're a Walpole guy, you know the people in Walpole, but now you're representing 9 communities, and you have to get equally ingrained, perhaps even the challenges more so, because people down in Rehoboth may view you as a Walpole guy way up north. He doesn't know where we're at. He probably couldn't even find Town Hall. And yet now, 14 years into it, and you've been there since 2004, and we're taping this in 2017. So this is your 7th term?
Yep. Yeah,
fantastic. Congratulations, by the way, on the recent election.
And I'm not fooling anybody. Once I take the mic in Rehoboth, they're all going to know that at one point I was from Boston, and here I am representing them. So you do have, you have to learn you'll have to learn the neighborhoods, you have to learn the roads, you have to learn the mores and the customs, and they're not too far different. You know, when you're talking good schools, backyard, great athletics, and a nice environment. Same in Rehoboth, is same in Walpole. But as my legislative profile grew, some of it's your personal. I think one of the first bills that I filed was, I'm a kid who grew up on a beach and a golf course, always outside, still to this day outside in as much as I can, no matter what the weather is. January, I've played golf this weekend. Try to every chance I get, I like to be outside.
Just so you know, folks, this is being filmed in January, so when he's playing golf out in the middle of winter, he's not kidding. He likes it.
I enjoy it, but I was worried about tanning. I was worried about UV exposure. So a couple of the efforts that I first signed on to was one, dealing with dermatologists and what could we do better. And one of the places that they turned me to, and where we as an office put our focus on, was teen tanning. And it was, you get sworn in January, legislation is due at the end of that month, and then you begin your, to try to navigate it through the path that they create for you through the committee process, was that they were worried about young girls in particular, but young people who were around prom season or other times, got themselves into a sense that they look better when they're tan. And they use those UV lights to affect that change that they want for prom or for pictures or for just maybe feeling good or they seem to think better, and maybe they look at a magazine cover. And fast forward, I think it took 12 years, it took six terms for us to reach that to fruition, where like the World Health Organization standard, nobody under 18 now is allowed to use a tanning bed unless it's a phototherapy device, which the doctor recommends them. And that's just because we're worried about the dangers.
And isn't that interesting? Because I do remember back at that time period, there was a lot of excitement about this new, everybody's going to open up a tanning spa and everybody's going to do it. And then there were a lot of concerns coming out, and the science wasn't there to say it was popularly believed, but at the same time, there's nothing proven. So it took 6 terms to get this piece of legislation through. And I'm sure part of it is the maturing of the science and the maturing of the industry, but also a greater understanding of the dangers of the UVs and of the tanning beds themselves.
And each year, you had another subset of individuals who were impacted and affected. The data on who I was working with, Mass Academy of Dermatology, Dana-Farber, and many of the Boston teaching hospitals. So I literally, when you say you get up to a hearing and you testify at that hearing, I was on the side of the angels. Mine was from a personal experience and wondering, like, had I done enough, and had I run through too many stop signs about what I was doing, am I covering up the right way, and understanding that I'm not trying to change the world. I'm just trying to give the information to younger kids.
But that's. And again, I'm speaking with our State Senator Jim Timilty, our 7th-term representative of the Norfolk-Bristol District. And it's a great, this topic is super, because I'm sure maybe I'm not sure, but you can tell me if I'm not sure. But I'm sure you did not go to medical school, and you did not take a course in, protective.
No.
You aren't a scientist.
Nope.
You aren't a doctor.
No.
You're a legislator. And one of the interesting things about being a legislator is it's a responsibility to get yourself up to speed and become expert level to the point where you can advocate for and defend a case. You have to do it on so many different topics. So this is a great example of, okay, you woke up one morning and, this is important. You need to learn up on it. And now you're all of a sudden involved with Dana-Farber and working with the organizations to advocate. So how cool is that?
And some heroic people, one of whom, Glenna Cole, God rest her soul, was battling stage 4. And was there to testify at the hearing. So it has an impact. And Glenna's story was that she was a lifeguard and started to like the way she looked during the summer and chased that through the year. And what we were saying was that the DPH standards and regulations around parental guidance for young kids, because if you could take I could have just a couple of years ago, I could have taken my 9-year-old as many times as I wanted because I was the parent. I was a custodial parent and I was there. And to some extent, maybe that's not the best practice. And we went back and forth with the industry, with some detractors. There was some in the media who didn't like it, thought it was unnecessary. And I thought that there was a need. And then what I had done was partnered with the EPA Sunwise Safety Education, so maybe one assembly a year or revenue neutral from the EPA, you could get materials to educate children to be real careful. The sun might be a little bit different than it is now. We have higher instances of melanoma here in Massachusetts than they do in Arizona because they deal appropriately with the sun. They know what they're doing. We might have lagged a little bit behind, and I think that the science showed us, and you can extrapolate what you want, but that we did very definitely have a higher instance, and maybe it was some of the behavior that we had learned here we don't have 330 days of sun like San Diego or Arizona, but maybe we were doing something different. So it took some time, but it was one of those things where I'm going to try to make an impact, and was successful.
And given the longevity and the success you've had, you're able to be in that position to see that piece of legislation through after so many years, which, had you given up and maybe decided to, make more money and leave public service, that wouldn't have happened. So thank you for that piece of service, because right there is a super example of why it's important that we have continuity, that we have people in legislature that know the system, know what's going on, and know how to affect change.
And each bill that comes to you can be very different. Some can just can be homespun from some instance that happened. I remember vividly getting an email in my first legislative session from a little girl from Walpole who had hurt her hand on a chain link metal basketball net. And she sent the nice little email to me. I cut my hand. I woke up in the hospital, got stitches, and now when it's cold, my hand hurts. The finger that I cut pretty severely hurts me now, and I just don't think that net should have been there, and I don't want this to happen to anybody in the Commonwealth. Is there something you can do? So I called her up and I said, hey, 10-year-old girl, I'm like, isn't it nice that something bad happened to you, but what you want to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else? So I gave her a call at her house, and then I said, you know what? I'm going to help you write this bill. You're going to file it. You're going to testify it. We're going to see if we can take your story, and maybe we'll have the same impact on the 199 people I work with and the governor, and maybe we can make you a law so that nobody else will be hurt like that. And it took me about 3 minutes to find where to house it in Mass General Law. Write it up. No chain link metal basketball, not a private driveway, but on a public park or playground. Shouldn't happen. If you play basketball, there's no point for that free swinging metal to be there. It's like a fishhook.
Right.
And I got a lot of feedback from really accomplished basketball players who had been hurt. And unfortunately, they sent their pictures as well, which wasn't necessary. But this young girl came in and testified before the Public Safety Committee. Now, I joined her at the table, and she knocked it out of the park. She told her story and wowed the room. Even the pros, the lobbyists with the $6,000 suits who work up there and are used to doors opening all over the time. I always say that the more your suit costs, the less time I have for you, because you're probably getting more time elsewhere. So come in overalls.
So that must mean I've got a lot of time with you, huh?
I wouldn't give you too much time with a suit that good. But she did such a great job. passed the Senate, passed the House, and the governor signed it. Ironically, one of the media outlets picked it up and said, "Is this what you're working on?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it didn't take me too long, and I think there's a good story behind it." And they're like, "What is that?" So I hand them the email. I'm like, "You get an email from a 10-year-old girl. It's your obligation as a public official, certainly as a state senator who represents her, who works for her, to call her back and say, hey, sorry that this happened. I think there's an action item that we can do. There's corrective action. Let's do it together." And the little girl killed it. She did a great job. It was wonderful. And it happened. I see them now and then, which is illegal. We didn't put a fine in it because I didn't think that was appropriate. It was just more, sometimes you do a law.
Direction.
To just, yeah, that's it. It's a suggestion. And, it shouldn't be there. But, yeah, I still got dinged in the story. I still got hit in the story. Like, this is frivolous bills that legislators are filing. And I thought it meant as much to me, that bill, because of where it came from, what its result was, and how that, I wrote her a recommendation for college not too long ago.
Excellent.
She's going to excel wherever she goes.
I have to ask, how's her finger?
Never, there's no lingering effects, but I'm sure when it's cold, it still hits her. But she'll always be able to remember that, that she made a pretty significant effort as a 10-year-old kid from Blessed Sacrament to help others. And it got done, and she was there. She could barely see over the table. And I'm telling you, she put together, I think Frost would have been happy with the blank verse that she did throughout that, and it left an indelible impact.
That's a fantastic story. Yeah. Well, that brings us to, that's back in 2004, and then we're talking about this. So let's talk about some legislative highlights along the way. And then I'd really like to talk about, the meat and potatoes. What's on your plate today? Okay. What is really stirring Jim's pot and make him excited to get up there to Beacon Hill every day?
Yeah, well, 2008, I think it was a big year for bills. I was pretty prolific that year. Not many of them seismic, but the one that I had worked on, which I got done in about 7 months, 8 months, was an act relative to the emergency system, to State 911. Okay. What we did was the statewide emergency telecommunications board had been put together in 1991 when there really weren't cell phones.
Right.
The communication was vastly different. Mostly we were on a wire line. It was going right, hardwired to your dispatch center in the old police station, and they could connect quite quickly with who the individual was because it came right up on the board, however the technology at the time. But that was it was cumbersome. The board was cumbersome. Their rules and regulations and the general law that enabled them were old. This is 2008, we're 17 years later. Mm-hmm. Seismic changes in technology and in cell phones, proliferation of cell phones. So it was an effort that had started with lowering the wire line. It was $1.25 per wire line to pay for 911 per month. So we brought the wire line, which was in everybody's houses, down to $1. Mm-hmm. The cell charge was 33 cents. So it was 33, more people had cell phones, all the kids in apartments and those of us walking around. So there were more cell phones. So it was the seniors who lived in homes and had the wire line were subsidizing a service that all of us who were using cell phones and didn't have a wire line anymore were. So we brought that up to 75 cents, brought the wire line down to 75 cents. So we were about 1/2 of the national average. And through that assessment on your cell phone, from 33 to 75, we were able to raise about $20 million a year. So in that time, since 2008, raised that factor of 20 to 25 million. And right now, your community, and what we wanted to do was regionalize. Mm-hmm. Let's invest in, we can't support 272 public safety answering points. We just can't, not to their best extent. And this is the life-saving service that everybody depends on it, particularly those who are disabled. If you have a disability, you're a factor of 7 more likely to be interacting with 911, either calling the subject of the call, or when the call comes in, you may be there. And they need to be trained in order to deal with you. And we can improve this system, and let's use this money and let's regionalize these. Instead of doing 272 all over the state, let's do what New Hampshire does, what California does. California does it, I think, with 7. New Hampshire does it with 1 or just under 4. So why do we have 272? So now there's an effort to regionalize, professionalize, make investments in hardware, software, physical plant training, and the facilities that the dispatchers who are providing this life-saving service, because the better they are with the individual and the better their information, the quicker it gets to the first responder, the better the outcome is. And I'm still excited. It's 2008.
Well, I can tell. This is great.
2008, we did this. I mean, it's not going to be without growing pains.
But also to show you how the events work. This is 2017, and right now we're having a discussion in Foxborough about forming a regional emergency response unit. So to that end, it still takes time.
Is it that? We're parochial, and there are going to be some headaches. But the end result is that there is a certain sum of money that's used just for the life-saving purpose of 911. Nobody's really noticed that that their fee went up on their wireless bill. I never got one complaint, and that their wire phone came down. So it was
Nobody called you up to thank you?
I was glad. Nobody called me to complain. Usually that's the one, because those stick. But it's, and as I say, 1/2 of the national average, but we've incented that regionalization. We know that 911 is going to be better, and we have no idea, and that's the thing that some people can't grasp, is you have no idea what 2 years is going to bring in technological advancements.
Well, I was just going to say that if this legislation was passed in 2008, maybe it's not parochial, but maybe it's just the normal maturation of the technology and the response concept, and how the science behind how you approach a 911 call, and how the cell phones are more reliable. They now have tracking. You can do all sorts of different things where maybe we didn't understand it or realize it or embrace it back then.
And through regionalization, one small part of that is that you now will be able to have the technology and also the ability, which you didn't previous to 2008, to make sure that a cell phone call is routed directly to the community where it emanates from, as opposed to run through the state wireless, then rerouted, which adds about a minute on to calls. But we didn't have the capacity back that far back.
Back then it was SP77, or I forget what it was that you were supposed to call, but
not quite sure. But it delayed it. So this will make a change, and I think it will. It'll move government into the 21st century. We set up that law in 2008, and then in its companion law of 2000, making it easier to regionalize, or streamlining it after we saw some of the process that went through. I believe that was 12 or 13 that we did that. These terms mixed together, and it's already saved lives. I know that, so I can feel very comfortable in an effort that I did with Undersecretary Grossman and Secretary Burke. And some members of law enforcement. That's where it came to me from the major city chiefs. It was their idea that we could be much better. So I know we've saved lives, and I know we're going to continue to make this system better and save more lives, because at the end of the day, that's what they do. They're the professionals. They know what they're doing. We're just going to make their hardware, software, physical plant, and their training that much better.
So we're here with Senator Jim Timilty, our representative for 7 terms at the State House for the Bristol, Norfolk District. And so we're talking about things that are happening today based upon work you did in 2008. Talking about first piece of legislation. We're talking about a significant piece of emotional legislation. Now we're here today, 2017, 2016 year. Legislative juices are flowing. You know how the House and the Senate work. You've made those relationships. Boom, what's going to happen today that you're going to be advocating for, that you're going to be pushing legislation for, that maybe 5-10 years from now we have the same conversation around the same television set with our hopefully just as good looking, but maybe a little bit older audience out there at Foxborough Cable Access. What's going to happen today that you want to really push?
I have been up on the Hill. Since being sworn in, we've been talking about bills, and there's been a group that has approached me asking me to, along with a member of the House from Needham, they'll file a bill for children who have special needs, some very difficult handicaps. They call it the Pediatric Palliative Care Bill, and these are a subset of individuals, about 906, who have tremendous challenges. We're talking 24/7, 365 needs. If something unfortunate were to happen and they have a turn for the worse in their medical diagnosis, the only place they can take them is a children's hospital ICU. So these parents basically have turned themselves into, just through the care for their child, into these are the miracles that might not have made it this far or even at all in different times of medicine. But in modern medicine, and the best that we have in the world, these miracles are happening, and they're living in homes, and they deserve everything that we can give them as a Commonwealth. So we're filing a bill. We're working on it now. Literally, in the months coming forward, we've already filed the jacket and have some of the text put together, and we'll add more of that as we want to make sure that these individuals come out of their care is now in a very localized area within the family with a lot of support. ICU level nurses are the ones who have to do the home care right now. It's significant expense, which I think all of us agree that this is what a Commonwealth is for, to take care of these families in this time of need. And we just want to make sure that we codify and we have some assurances and some guarantees that we'll be spending money up front as a legislature to fit in this line item so that we will avoid the very costly lapses if they can't get coverage, if they can't get an ICU. It's not any nurse or not any caregiver that can come in and help these families who, as I say, are 24/7, 365. This is somebody who has to have the highest of skills, and this is a very sought after trade in the Commonwealth. You have that set of skills, you are going to be paid a certain sum of money, and there is going to be a lot of private sector opportunities for you. So it's difficult for some of these ICU nurses, for the love of it, to go and they do the care, but at some point when it's time for a child to go to college or something, they make other decisions. And if we can't keep that 24/7, 365 care, that they can end up in a placement in a hospital for weeks at a time, costing the Commonwealth far greater than what we're asking them to spend on the front end. So it's not going to be without its challenge in getting everybody to focus on out of 6 million people of 906 children. But I think if I can string the words together and I can make my effort known to all of my colleagues, I'm hoping that we can, in a smart way, which we've never been able to do with homelessness, is spend the appropriate resources on the front end to make certain that the back end is much better. So it's
saves
a bill.
money, and it's also the right thing.
It's without a doubt, it's the right thing to do. It's as a zero-based budgeter, because I think if you do have the principle of zero-based budgeting, that you're always justifying what you're spending, and I think government hasn't done enough of that to challenge. Well, we did it that way last year. That is, use it or lose it. Like the vacation days, I'm fine with that. But if you haven't spent all of your resources as a state agency, and this is a time-honored tradition with them, in before July 1st, they spend whatever they can, because then it doesn't justify them ever trying to save any money. So as a zero-based budgeter, I realized that there's no meat, there is no waste, there is nothing here. These families just are not getting the need and the care that they deserve from the Commonwealth, and it's my job to highlight, to some extent, their delight in the family of like what they have, in the plight when we're not doing enough for them on the front end, and lapses happen, and then then they're being treated outside of. And in many respects, some of these children, don't get out of their hospital room that is their bedroom.
Right.
And it's very difficult and trying and taxing on the entire family. And I think we as a Commonwealth should challenge ourselves to do something better. I see a finite group of people. I see a way that we can change. I'm not in the Senate to change the world. I'm in to try and change these individuals' worlds. And I'm hopeful. There's so many different competing and wonderful and laudable projects all throughout the Commonwealth, and I think that's one lesson you get as a rookie up there in your spring, is that number of individuals that come in with great projects that need more money, and the face that's behind each and every one of those line items, whether it be from libraries to palliative pediatric care, transportation, senior services, veteran services, which we're one of the best, or K through 12, which is one of our largest K through 12 education, which is one of our largest line items. These phases, we can make a difference. How do we make that difference? We have to apportion that pie right and give to the worthy, needy what they need first, and then continue to matriculate through our way until we get, hopefully, to everybody, and just try to make everybody's day a little bit better. Is what my effort is up there.
Senator Timilty, thank you so much for coming and sharing your passion and the things that you're trying to accomplish. Talking about apportioning the pie, I cannot think of a better person up there to try to figure that out and take care of the people that need to be taken care of, and yet keep a business sense of it so that we're all supported and we're able to support those things, because it's not a simple matter of wanting to do something, it's how do you pay for it?
The ways and the means.
Sounds as though you have your finger on that pulse.
But in concert with a bunch of other experts, whether it be private sector or with my colleagues who have more time than me, or somebody with a new and fresh perspective, always willing to learn, understand my limitations and my faults, and just always try not to make the same mistake a second time.
I'm going to give you the last word in a second. For you folks at home, I want to thank you for joining us. Reminder that you can get a hold of Senator Timilty. He's very easy to get a hold of. You can call him at the State House at 617-722-1222, or you can email him at james.timilty@masenate.com. The way I always get a hold of him is I just log on to www.mass.gov. He's in the directory. Very easy to get a hold of him. Jim, thank you so much for coming out. You get the last word, sir.
Delighted to be here. It's a privilege and honor to work for the good people of Foxborough. I appreciate their faith in me. I love working for them, and if they need me, just reach out.
And we appreciate your work, and thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you also for watching. On behalf of all the volunteers here at Foxborough Cable Access, thank you for taking the time to watch. If you'd like to be a part of our family and meet interesting and fascinating people who work for us, such as Senator Timilty, want to come down here and learn how you can be a volunteer along with Betty Travers, Deb Storrs, Mike Stewart, and Paul Beck behind the glass. I'm Bob Hickey, your host. I hope you have a great day, Foxborough. Take care, everybody.